Well, welcome friends for this session on the 15th of August, and we're speaking tonight with some of the early believers from South Australia. We have people online from all different states in Australia, some for the first time. We have people coming online from overseas, some in the very early hours of the morning, so thank you for coming online for this session. And I'll introduce the topic of the history of the faith in South Australia in brief, and then I'll Selma Galvin to speak, one of the members of that community for the last quite a few decades, and she will speak to us of her memories and thoughts. And then I'll move to Harwood, to Bob Harwood and to Maury in South Australia, who will continue the story. So we have a lot to cover tonight, and so thanks so much for coming online. I'm going to just speak briefly about the history of the Bahai community in South Australia. There are some sources published already on this topic, but certainly not enough. I published a couple of papers on the topic, for example, on the Fitzners who went to Portuguese Timor. I've spoken of the South Australian Baha'is in some of the overviews of the Baha'i faith in Australia. Merle Higgy put together some of her memories, as also did Aioli Mann, and these are in these two wonderful publications that are available to you. At the, I think the both were published privately, but you can chase them up, and they're a great resource.
No, that's what people write to you.
Oh, okay.
Now, there's a number of key aspects to the faith in the state of South Australia. When you start to look at the significant events that have happened in South Australia, the contribution that this community has made to the overall Australian Baha'i community, first visited by Clara and Hyde Dunn in 1920. And as you know, this series has been inspired by the fact that it's 100 years since Clara and Hyde Dunn came to Australia in 1920. The first Baha'is in South Australia were Person Maisie Armand during that first visit of Clara and Hyde Dunn, and they became Baha'is in 1923. The following year, Martha Root visited, an American traveller who had some significant meetings in Adelaide, and a local assembly was formed on December the 5th of 1924. There are other important early dates, such as Keith Ransom Kaler's visit in 1931. And I'm not here to give the detail of those events because we'll move on to the evening session proper. But it was through the visit of Keith Ransom Kaler that some of the very capable South Australian Baha'is entered the community, including Hilda Brooks and other members of her family. You see other key dates from the 1930s and 40s, the establishment of the National Spiritual Assembly in 1934, with Adelaide being one of the essential spiritual assemblies that formed that. The arrival into the Baha'i community of Collis and Madge Featherston in the 1940s, and then the gradual establishment of the South Australian spiritual assemblies. It started with Adelaide, but then Woodville, and then Port Adelaide, and then the years of the World Crusade. The years of the World Crusade, 1953 to 63, saw a number of South Australian Baha'is travel to the Pacific and indeed to Timor in Southeast Asia. And the number of communities within South Australia extended significantly. And there was also a beginning of Aboriginal communities in South Australia at this time. I'm only giving the barest of outlines tonight before we introduce our speakers. And just a few photos to go with the overview I've given. I believe this is in South Australia because it's in one of the South Australian believers. It's Martha Root. And this is a very well-known photo of the early community. I won't pick out all the names, but you can see Clara and Hyde Dunn in the center. You can see Person Maisie Armand at the far right. You can see Robert Brown at the front. You can see Bertha Dobbins, the lady with the bonnet near the left, and other early members of the South Australian community. And we also do have the names of that go with that photo. It's interesting to look that when the National Assembly was formed in 1934, 4 of the members came from Adelaide. I've indicated them in red: Perce Armand and Robert Brown in the back row. And in the front, Sylve Jackman and Hilda Brooks. 4 of the members of the National Assembly were from Adelaide. And they were instrumental in setting up the national community for the next 10 to 15 years, that group of people. There's another early photo. This is just a photocopy, but we do have the photo, and that shows again some of the early South Australian Baha'is. Now, during the years of the Crusade, led by Collis Featherson, the Asian Teaching Committee was responsible for keeping in contact with pioneers throughout all the Pacific Islands and Southeast Asia. And that was run from Adelaide. And that was really the engine of growth in the 1950s, not only, well, for beyond Australia. That's a photo I took when I was a young man, and I went to meet Bertha Dobbins, and there she is with James Chittleborough. So I put that in to share a photo of, and she had been out in the New Hebrides, now Vanuatu. This is Florence and Harold Fitzner in Portuguese Timor, in Dili. They traveled there. And then this is a much more recent photo, 1995. It's a reunion of Adelaide and South Australian Baha'is who had met Clara and Hyde Dunn, and they met in 1995, and a number of those people are online with us tonight, so I wanted to show that photo. And Howard Harwood is in the center of that photo there. Howard, on the left, was one of the early councillors in this country, seen with Thelma Perks and Suhail Ala'i, appointed in 1968. So hopefully we'll hear about Howard tonight. I thought I'd show this photo. I think this is the last photo I'm going to show. It's Howard. It's with Lillian Ala'i. And if anybody can recognize the 2 gentlemen at the back, that's a bonus question that I'll leave for the end. So I'm just going to stop my share now. And I'm going to welcome Selma to speak to us. And the brief is for her to tell us about her experience in the South Australian community since she became a Baha'i. And I'm going to hand over to Selma and her daughter, Catherine, to assist her. And so now everybody can hear you, Selma, and we look forward to hearing what you want to share with us this evening. We have a problem with the volume, Catherine. We can't hear. We've got to get back to that good volume that we had before.
He is muted.
Hello.
Welcome, Maury. We've got a little bit of a sound problem with Selma at the moment, but welcome to the session. I wonder if you can introduce yourself to everybody who's here, and also Bob who's with you. They'd love to know where you are, and we'd love to hear from you tonight.
You go first, Maury.
My name is Maury Taylor. I live at Goolwa in South Australia. I'm 86 years of age. I'm the youngest brother of Selma Galvin. Thank you.
Bob.
My name is Bob Harwood. I'm going to talk to you tonight about my father and tell you the sorts of things that happened in his life and what made him be what he was and who he was and how he came to become what he was and how he was. It's been a long time coming that people wanted to know, but today's the day.
Welcome, Selma.
Welcome, Selma. I'm talking to you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm not hearing you, but I can say a little bit, not a lot. I joined in about 1948 or something of that kind, and I went over to a session in Yerenball at that time with a lot of people who were very, very enthusiastic about the faith. Some belonged to the faith, some didn't, but I learnt a lot. They talked a lot about the fundamentals of the faith at that conference. There was a lot of interest and energy there, which Those interested me a great deal at the time. As far as getting into the faith, people were very interested in relating to you on a social level. I noticed particularly at that time that there's always something going on that you could go to as a young person, as an older person. There's always a lot of fun, good, healthy fun, and kept things going for a while. The young people were delighted and doing what they could do with their meetings, always going to the meetings, so on, and living a nice Bahai life, really. I suppose that's what they were trying to do. They did have the faith at that time. Mother and Father Dunn were around. As you can see, they came much earlier, started. They were an amazing couple, but we did meet them, and they were really inspirational. But Mother Dunn wouldn't talk for too long. She'd say to me, well, that's enough. You've had enough now. We have to do. She was preserving her energy, but they had a lot of power with them. You could feel it. And then she was moving around. Collis Featherston was growing and growing in strength and looking after Mother Dunn, looking after his son. They had public meetings. That's part of what they did then, part of the history of the Bahai faith. He booked the Woodville Town Hall, I remember. Yes. So we got an artist from the Conservatorium in Adelaide to sing at the meeting, just a general meeting it was. It went over very well. That's the sort of thing they were doing, bringing the faith to the general population, and they were responding in these public meetings. They were looking after the young people, supplying interesting places for them to go as well, have fun at their level. I can remember that. I was very impressed with that because I, a little bit later, had children that took a lot of interest in those activities. That's very helpful to parents, isn't it? I don't know that I know a lot more about the basis of the faith because there were no books around at that time, and I could not myself see that there could be books. But you see now what we've got wonderful books, and especially the books of the Prophet and his son. And I really do recommend that you read and read and read them to deepen yourself in the faith and become part of this wonderful, what they call the light divine, that carries you further and further and deeper into what the faith's about. It's a faith that's there to investigate, research it, and you'll find it will actually change the way you look at and live a light divine. That's all I'd like to say. The faith, the reason for being there, and the reason that you're in the faith and not your neighbour or your relative, but you yourself. Thank you very much. And
we'll see if they've got any questions. Did you have any questions, Graham?
Thank you so much. That is a wonderful opening. Catherine, we would love to know about your mother's family background and what was it about the Bahai community and the Bahai teachings that made her decide to join the community.
So what's your family background and what made you decide to be a Bahai? Maybe you want to say how Nana heard about the faith.
Yes, I will. Oh, I would like to say in the beginning that Bertha Dobbins, whom you've mentioned in one of your bills here, Bertha Dobbins was a Bahai herself, an early one, and I'm talking now about 1947. Bertha Dobbins rang Collis Featherston, and the date that I've got for him joining is 1946, I think. He joined 46, and then he was officially recognised in later that year or the next year. I don't understand what happened there, but they had that organisation going. Anyway, she rang Collis Featherston and she asked him to get enough people to have a little meeting in a home. Well, she got the right man, didn't she? What she did first of all, she and Joe, her husband, came down, I believe, and they stood in front of Collis's house and they said the remover of difficulties 100 times. And then they went home. And out of that came these people to Collis's meeting at home. And my mother was one of them. Frank Langley was another. He contacted the mother. And Bertha herself had been a school teacher at a local college. She contacted some of the students and they came along to the meeting. She had that sort of presence where people wanted to be where she was. She was feisty, old Bertha, but oh, lovely. Anyway, they came to the meeting.
Mum, how did Collis know your mother, Ruth Taylor?
Collis knew her through Frank Langley. He was a Mason, actually.
Freemason.
Freemason. My father belonged to that lodge. And he got to know them. That's why they were there, why my mother was there. And the other friends from the college, I think. Now, just this one meeting with Collis Featherston there, and they got the little assembly out of that group of people in no time at all. It was amazing. You see, there was a power there which we didn't expect or understand, but my mother had it. I know she had it. She had it all her life.
She was on that assembly.
And she was on that assembly, yes, and she did all sorts of little things, but I can't relate them because I was too early in the faith to take a lot of notice. But when she came home from that meeting, she said to me, oh, they talked about the return of Christ. And she said, that was interesting. And they believe that women should have an education. They're promoting education for women. Well, there I was, about 18, listened to that, and I was gone. And I remember the feeling I had. I was transported because I had this deep feeling about the importance of education for women, where women were not given any credence at all. Often they were discouraged from learning anything, but I had no sense of being held back by them. I pushed forward myself, and then I knew that this was it. It had a tremendous effect on me, but that was through my mother. She became a Baha'i very soon after that, and she was on the special committee as well. She developed a great friendship with the Featherstons, Madge Featherston, and Madge used to pop her latest little baby on her bike and come over on Saturday afternoon, I remember, to see Mum and just have a little chat and then go home. But she kept up that relationship there and the chatting, which was wonderful. Mum would be in the kitchen cooking or baking a cake or something, and Madge would be there talking to her with that little one. And that's how that built up there. And they used their institution that they belonged to develop the faith and promote more people. And by that, at that time, there was a lot of enthusiasm by a lot of people, which Bertha Domnitz had brought down to Collis Featherston in 1947. And that's how that actually began, a very famous beginning, because as you know, someone came out from the other side of the world to investigate the Baha'is in Australia to see if anyone was able to take on the position which he did. Someone in the group will remember what he was. They recognised he had this special power in himself.
You're talking about Collis Featherston?
Yes,
Yeah.
and you know what he did. He was a businessman himself, but he was then after that travelling all over the place. And then the books started to come and people could read and we could learn more and more about the depth of the faith, because believe you me, there's a lot in it. And they say mankind now wouldn't recognise what's going to happen in the future. And I believe it. If you read the books, you can see that they change the way you think, and they change the knowledge that you think you have as well. And they're more spiritual, I would say. They think more and more about power and vibrations and being in touch with these things. And the more you pray and the deeper your prayer is, and the sincerity, because you obviously give out vibrations according to your own sincerity, then the faith will progress and you will be a part of it. Is that all right now?
Thank you so much, Selma. Can you tell us more about your own response? Your mother became a Baha'i, you were a young woman. What did you do then? Did it take you some time before you also joined the community? And
Okay.
about
So
your
can I
life.
just ask one question at a time, Graham? My memory's crap, terrible. So what was your response? Your mum came home, had, found the faith, you were a young woman. What was your response? What's the next part of your question, Graham?
Now that's basically it. Just want to know her own response at the time. And what was she doing at the time? Was she doing some education or working or starting a family? What was Selma's situation?
That's a good question.
So Graham wants to know, where were you at the time? What were you doing? Had you started a family? Yeah, when you heard about faith.
For me, Graham, that's a very good question. But just about me, that's the trouble. But it is a good question for me. So what I did straight away, because I believed it, I was a fire, believed it, but just in myself. I didn't expect it to go anywhere yet, and I can understand that now. I went and studied all the religions, would you believe?
Yeah.
I'd never done that before. I'd heard of them, but I went and found out a lot about them. And there wasn't a lot of, there were not a lot of books to find, but what I did find, I tried to read and understand, and that was the Hindu, the Buddhist, of course the Muslims, and then there were a few in the Bible too that were mentioned, like Adam and Moses, some of the other prophets. And I thought, goodness me, they all talk about do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I was astounded at that. And that was the main message I got from them all by reading the basics. Do unto others. You know, you can't argue with that, can you? But man had a bit of fiddling to do with each of the religions. And of course, that's the thing we've got to try to dispel now, to cut off all the superstition and things that have been added by man himself when he's tried to understand certain aspects of it and has failed miserably in getting the right aspect.
Mum, now, how old were you? What were you doing?
Yeah.
Were you at university then? What were you doing? What about you at this time?
I was doing all sorts of things. I was trying to get educated without having an education. I mean, I'd been at high school until the leaving, but we had no money. We tried to do all sorts of things, but there was no money, so you couldn't do it. And of course, women were second citizens. So I worked very, very hard in the day, and at night went to night school, finally got my final matriculation at night school, and then I started to go to the university when I was about 21, 22. I was not married. I was not married until I was 23 or 4, and I was very lucky to have these wonderful Baha'is at my wedding. I felt that was a wonderful thing to happen. But unfortunately, one of the women that came to the conference in Yarraville with me in 47 broke her leg at our wedding. So that wasn't too good either. But it was lovely to have her there, Mrs. Boyce. And she was not a Baha'i, but see, she went all that way in the train like I did, sat up all night and went to a conference. And that I'm not too sure how she developed from there. She was another part of the country from me. That's all. So from there, I had to get my education, which I did. Or I got some of it anyway. When you say you get an education, it means you end up with a degree of some kind. But then the education part, you've got to pull out yourself, pull the good parts out and use it, make good for the human race, you know, good for humankind. Do what you can. And you keep on doing it and you keep changing. Because in my lifetime, the computers came into being, hasn't it? And so all the mathematics, the old mathematics I did, had to be thought about again and updated. America did it before, and then we had to update it all in about 1966 when they changed our currency. Well, I was a teacher, and so that was a lot of work. And bringing a new currency into a country that you yourself didn't know very well. And I tell you what, I wasn't too good at the money exchange either with them. And here I was teaching children. They were better than I was eventually. Yes, so we had that. And I had another subject, Latin, which I'd majored in. I loved Latin. I loved the politics of the Romans and the Greeks. I loved their philosophy. I could see they were way ahead of often where we were and made people think. And I loved that. And of course, I had my brother in the background there, being what he is with his questions. He's never satisfied unless he's found out the reason for everything, evidence for it, what it all means. And that's been a great help to me in my development of the faith. It's made me read. And I think our whole family have taken bits and pieces and gone on from there, from where he was and where still is. He can still leave us behind with his wonderful knowledge and what he's finding out all the time about the amount of power there is in the faith if you get onto the right message. A lot of power there, but you've got to find it and you've got to work to get it as well.
Thank you.
So I wish you all to find that power and use it. Go out.
It's wonderful listening to you. Everybody online enjoying. Catherine, maybe I've got one last question and then I'll see if there are questions from the audience. So my question is, what did Selma's friends, how did they respond when she told them about the Baha'i teachings? What was the attitude to the faith in South Australia in the 1950s?
Yeah, great question. So how did your friends respond when you became a Baha'i? What was what was it like in the late 40s, 1950s? How were they receptive to the faith?
No, my friends didn't want to know anything about it. No. But it was later in one of my teaching positions where I came across Jackie Revolt in Adelaide and Ruth Singh. Though much later, they're a lot younger than I was, but they showed a great deal of interest in it. And Ruth and I became rather active at that time in that school. We used to have meetings lunchtime and we talked about it together and helped ourselves grow in the faith. Ruth is still there doing that and talking to her friends about things, but that's about where that ended.
No, but what about in the 1950s? What about in that period of time? What
In
was
that
it like
period
in
of
Australia?
time, yes, very few people were interested in the things I was interested in, except my mother, which was unusual, wasn't it? No, not very many at all, 1947. But what I did notice, as I said before, the people that came in it had a lot of enthusiasm. They seemed to be advanced in their thinking, but they were all over the place. They were not my friends. So that was a difference, you see.
Wow.
And of course, you have to learn to be very tolerant, understand why they can't see what you can see, and not let it make any difference. But what I do notice, just one little thing, if it helps, is that the people from the East who've come out, you know, from Iran and so on, and the people in the West are different. Do you agree with that? I find a big difference there, and we have to work together. Like Baha'u'llah has said, he wants the East and the West to come together. The West have got a lot more of this spiritual power in them, and we've got more of the material power. That's what Baha'u'llah said. That's what I can find, and I dare say you will too. So we have to work at that. Just because they're from another country, they could have another culture and not work very well with you because of your own culture. That's certainly what I have found. And you've got to get to know them. So it means, doesn't it, you've got to go out and have coffee with them. For me, eating is a very important way of socialising so that you do develop spiritually as well.
Thank you, Selma. Catherine, tell your mother that we are going to have some sessions looking at the Persian Baha'is in Australia. That's coming up later in the series.
Okay.
We do have one or two questions from the audience now.
They're going to look at the relationship with the Persian-Australian relationship in a later part of the series, so that'll be interesting. So we've got some questions from the audience. Are you ready? Quick fire questions, Graham.
So the first question is, do you have other memories of Clara Dunn to share with us?
Do you have any other memories of Clara Dunn?
No, very few memories of her, but she was there. She was calm, very calm. And Collis Featherston and his pals looked after her, that's what I can remember. But she spent a lot of her time out of our state. She was there some of the time. But when I look at a photograph of her, she wasn't as old as I thought she was, because I was young, you see. I thought she was very old. But
Fair enough.
she wasn't at that time.
Thank you.
What a wonderful job she did, just going around. And with Collis there too. He was a great support to her. That's my memory. And I was very impressed with what she did. And little did I know how much she did, she and her husband. It's that power, you see, the power they have. The power to come from America, start in Australia with a brand new religion that nobody wants to know. Yeah. But there you are. I locked onto it because of the education. That's what the thing that really got me. But then all the other things they believed in, I heard of soon, and I believed in them all.
Yeah.
So no problem.
Thank you, Selma. Now, you must remember Collis Featherston's daughter, Mariette. Mariette Leong is online, and Mariette wants to offer some comments now. So, Mariette, please.
Collis Featherston's daughter, Mariette's online, and she's about to say something.
Oh.
Yes.
I remember Mariette.
Selma was that little baby in my mother's bicycle basket.
She was the baby in the bicycle
Yeah,
basket.
that's right.
Oh, my goodness.
I was born in 46. My parents became Baha'is December 44. They first expressed their interest to become Baha'is. But their registration, their formal written approval didn't come through until February 45. And that was because they had to fill out their declaration card, it had to go off to the national office, and it took that time for the mail and so on to go through. But also they were required to study the Will and Testament of Abdu'l-Baha, which was the formal entry into the door, so to speak, of all the Baha'is at that time. They had to have the education of the Will and Testament of Abdu'l-Baha before they became Baha'is.
So they had to have the Will and Testament of Abdu'l-Baha before they could become Baha'is. They were interested in 44, but it didn't get through until 45.
Oh,
But they had to study the will and testament.
really?
Yes,
I
that's what.
didn't know that, Mariette.
Well, that's as I understand it. Yes.
Yep.
So I just wanted to make those few comments.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Well.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you, Mariette. And Catherine, can you please thank Selma?
We
on
live in
behalf
South
of all of us?
Australia.
Thanks, Mum, on behalf of everybody.
And if maybe we can all
Thank you very
clap
much.
And,
And they're all
thank
giving you a
for that.
clap. So I'm not sure, Graham, if you want to let everybody know that Mum is 95.
Wow.
So,
And a half.
oh, yes, and a half.
I had a question.
There's a question here, Mum.
I'm sorry, Siva, I have to move on to.
Okay.
Move on.
Okay, no problem.
It's all right.
So thank you. I'm going to now invite Bob and Maury to
you
begin.
can
I
take
don't know how you're going to divide the time amongst yourselves, but we look forward to hearing from you.
Hello, Graham.
Welcome, Bob. We can hear you. We can see you. We're looking forward to what you had to share with us.
I wrote it down because I can't remember it. It happened that long ago. So I'm just going to read it to you. The story of the Harwood family. Not the whole story, but some highlights. So who are the Harwoods? We'll start with Howard, my father. He was born on the 10th of September 1914, just after Abdul Bahar was in America, and the world was still at war with itself. Howard's father, David, aged 23, enlisted on the 27th of May 1915 and was killed at Gallipoli on the 31st of October 1915. 157 days of service, and Howard lost his father, and Howard was 416 days old. How cruel, how cruel. My grandmother went on to marry again, and for South Australians in Adelaide would know of Hilda Reid, who served the faith in many ways all of her life. A most inspiring, dedicated Bahai was Howard's sister, and John was a brother in the second marriage. The second husband to my grandmother was a Swedish migrant with different cultural habits, which Howard found difficult at such a young age, at 8 years of age. You can imagine. Howard married on the 20th of October 1938, but war was on again, and he enlisted on the 11th of July 1940 and discharged in 1945. Now, at the age of 31, finally he could blend into life with some peace, but now he had 3 children, 3 boys, and that was not easy either. The Baha'i faith was brought to the attention of the family when Abilda Reid became a Baha'i in 1945 by Harold and Florence Fitzner. My grandmother joined in the 23rd of August 45, and Howard and Myrtle, my mother, joined on the 29th of April 1951. So how did Howard deal with the years from 8 to 24? That is another question. He went to a Catholic school and worked on a fruit property in Monash in the Riverland. I personally did not like the city much, but to go and meet all the Baha'i friends, while we had friends where we lived, they would gradually disappear because we were of that funny religion. However, I could deal with the city for about 2 days at the most, and going back to the bush was very welcome, I can tell you. The Featherston family was the city coming to the bush, a family of females to a family of males in the bush. However, Mr. Featherston was different. He was a very precise, exact man, and when they came to visit, I sat spellbound by how he said what he said. The Featherstons had a great effect on our family. He appointed my father as an auxiliary board member in 1964. By now, Howard had 4 sons and 1 daughter. The eldest, David, and then Mick, myself, Elaine, and Chaz. Another story was Mr. Featherston sent my father out into the Pacific Islands to visit the Baha'is, etc. And one time when Howard came home, he was amazed at what Mr. Featherston had visited all the villages before Howard went there. Mr. Featherston was a very precise, exact in detail. He looked into everything in detail. He taught our family a lot, and he did it in a very simple, calm, uplifting way. Abdul Baha had a habit of lifting his upturned hands up as he spoke to the people listening to him. And Mr. Featherston did the same with his words and the tone of his voice, raising and lowering his voice as he deemed to fit what he was saying. Mr. Featherston became my father's mentor, and as Howard threw off the shackles that had held him back for his early years of his life, so he grew to know and to love God and all those who met in the rest of his life. In the 1960s, we had many visits from Baha'is from the city who would come for a day or a weekend or a longer stay. While this happened, the fruit property still needed attention, and so it was a busy time for all. We all grew with knowledge of the faith and became a very big family. One of Howard's great passions was the Aboriginal people. He and his beloved wife, Myrtle, Madge and Morris Williams, and Beryl and Ephraim Tripp formed the first National Aboriginal Teaching Committee and spent many years, all of the rest of their lives, reaching out to this beautiful race of people. He was a man who really loved the cause of Baha'u'llah and who was focused on it. He had a great capacity for hard work, and he was prepared to endure all kinds of hardship and inconveniences in his travels for the faith in the Pacific Islands. That's a quote from Ioli's book. My mother, my sister Elaine, and Auntie Abilda Reed, in 1976, travelled to Haifa for their pilgrimage and visited Iran, the Mediterranean, Europe, Great Britain, Canada, and the United States. Story. While my mother was in Old Shiraz, a group of young children threw rocks at her. Myrtle's reaction was that perhaps they had suffered a little of what the early believers suffered at the hands of the mob. Again, that's from Ioli's book. All the children of the Harwood family joined the faith between 1958 and 1972. When writing this, none of the next generation have followed, but the grandchildren of Abilda, who brought the faith to the family, have joined the faith, making it 4 generations. Over the years, the availability of Baha'i books increased, teaching increased, the LSA was elected many times, and life was great. Each member of the family spread their wings and went their way. The world moved forward with great memories of what was and to build memories that will be in the future. Today, that seems a world away, but what we have these days are the stories as we are sharing tonight. The stories are of yesterday, but can be just as good if it happened just yesterday. Sharing stories is a very good way to teach the faith. When I went to live in Goa after Kath died, I met up with Maury Taylor and we started the Friday Night Club, where we met and talked about the faith. It was a fabulous gathering, and I recommend it to all to meet and just chat to each other about the faith will be very beneficial to you. Another idea is to meet and discuss the messages from the Universal House of Justice as a group, and so get a fuller appreciation and understanding of what is being said in the message. Otherwise, it just becomes another message to be filed away. To finish up, let me quote Shoghi Effendi: the principles, the administration and fundamentals of the faith are well known, but the friends need to greatly and to study more profound works of the faith, which would give them spiritual maturity to a greater degree, unify their community life, and enable them to better exemplify the Baha'i way of living. In other words, lead the life. That's a quote from the compilations. I believe Howard did that to some extent by reading the Gleanings. Thanks to Graham Hassel and thanks to Selma. P.S. Selma and Maury are responsible for putting together the coffee table book. And if you haven't seen it and read it, you are missing out on a real treat. The brother-sister relationship works very well with these two. They complement each other beautifully. And I thank you for listening. Thanks, Bob.
Bob, thank you so much for that splendid overview of your father's life, in which many of us heard some details for the first time. We're very grateful to you. I want to turn to Maury in a moment, but Bob, you know, your father had such a big personality. He was such a vibrant force. And I just wonder if there's some way that you can convey to those who never met him something of his character and the drive of his personality and his zeal for the faith. Is there an anecdote or a memory that can convey the way in which your father would command a meeting or a gathering and gather friends around him? I wonder how you can respond to that.
I think my father had a bounty of just being with his mother for the first 8 years before she married again. And that gave him, although he may not have known it at the time, since I've been married and had children, I can see the benefit that that had. When Kath stayed home and didn't go to work and he was just with the children, it made a huge difference in comparison to, for argument's sake, my brothers and other people around her. The second thing, which I've tried to say in my talk, is the influence that Mr. Featherston had on our family. It was the most profound thing that I've ever seen. And I think that the possibility for Howard to be the way he was always there. It's just that he needed somebody to sort of put it into its right perspective so that he could then go forward with it. And Mr. Featherston is a remarkable man, absolutely remarkable man. What could I say about him? I grew up, I had children. My wife wanted me to join Rotary, so I did. I didn't think that was a good idea, but she thought it was a good idea. And I became president and all those things. And one day I thought, we need to have somebody come and tell us about the faith. So I contacted Mr. Featherston and he drove all the way up to Berry to give this talk and then drive all the way back home again. I mean, tell me, he was a most inspiring man, and whatever he touched worked. That's my experience. That's the only thing I can put it down to. Mind you, Howard made a lot of mistakes along the way, and we all make lots of mistakes, but he learned, like I learned, like everybody learns, and he'd fall over, he'd pick himself up and go back and try again.
Bob, can I just ask, I've been collecting photographs and I got a few from Mariette recently. I didn't realise that Howard played the saxophone, and I just wondered if he had much music in the house. And I was very excited to see that he was playing the saxophone and someone was playing the guitar.
One of the things that he did during the war was he was in a band and they used to play music for the dancers, and he liked to do that, and he did that. At home, he played the saxophone and he played the violin, and my mother played the piano, and my uncle played the piano accordion. But Avilda Reed is a most spectacular. She actually went to the music conservatorium in Adelaide, and she was a brilliant, absolutely brilliant pianist, a bit like Mariette is a brilliant pianist. And she, after her husband died in '52, she actually sustained her family by actually teaching people how to play the piano in Goodwood, Lort Avenue, I think it was. So music was definitely a part of our lives before television and before, you know, we listened to the radio and got the news, and then they turned it off, and then we used to have sing-songs and we were together. It was fun. It was nice. We thought it was never going to end, but it did. So what else would you like to know?
Thank you, Bob. I might just ask Maury to speak, and then we will take questions for the both of you. Maury Taylor, lovely to have you online, and I should have mentioned that they're coming to us tonight from Goolwa in South Australia. And just tell us a bit about your background. We've met your sister Selma, but a bit more about yourself and your memories of becoming part of the Bahai community.
I first heard of the faith when I was about 14 from Mr. and Mrs. Featherston. I met Mother Dunn and the Fitzners. And on one occasion, my father said to Mother Dunn, well, no, first of all, Mother Dunn was saying how bad communism was. And my father said, if the Christians had done their job properly, communism would never have got to start. Well, Mother Dunn flew at him like a band of rooster. I'll never forget that. Gosh. But poor old Daddy loved it, you know. So in our place, there were lots and lots of discussions. But I think my own development in the faith early as a young lad was from my mother. She was often talking to me about the faith, never quoting, but she would talk about the writings in general and about the spiritual development of people. And I think, like Bob said, once you start to read the writings, your thinking changes. And I think that had a big impact on me as a young man. And as a result of that, as a young man, I never ever wanted to drink alcohol. I never wanted to join the mob, you know. And in later times, I joined the Commonwealth Police, and I was in that for 16 years. And on one occasion, I wasn't a Bahai at this time. On one occasion, I was bringing a chap back for deportation from Alice Springs, and I had a copy of a prayer book I was given when I was 15 in my suit pocket. And I can still remember coming back on the plane with the chap alongside of me, and I was reading this piece from the Bahai writings. It was absolutely amazing, really. But it wasn't until in later years I started to grow wheatgrass for people as a hobby, because I read somewhere once it would give people energy. And my mother had very high blood pressure. It was 195 over 110, had it for years. And she wanted to start drinking this wheatgrass juice. And I said, you have to have about 50% of your food raw as well. And it was about 3, 4, 5 months. The blood pressure came down to 140 over 80. And in that time I was selling wheatgrass juice, several people, and quite ill too, had said to me they felt like going back to their churches. And in a few weeks and a few months' time, these people died one after the other. And it really opened my eyes, because being in the police at that time, I sort of lost all faith in humanity, actually. Things I encountered myself, and things I had to read, and I was on deportations for a while, writing them up for Canberra. And when I joined the faith, it wasn't an emotional join to me. It was really an intellectual thing, because I thought, yeah, this is right. I like the concept of progressive revelation. And Selma telling me, of course, about the spiritual evolution of humanity over the years. One thing went together, and I got into it boots and all. And that's been my journey. And I've endeavoured, in company with Selma, in all things, we've put together 9 compilations of extracts from the writings, and we put together the coffee table book. And that was designed to Baha'is have it on their coffee table when non-Baha'is came in, just to browse through it. But apart from that, things have been pretty quiet for me. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you, Maury. Maury, what was the year that you became a Baha'i?
Sorry?
When did you join the faith?
I became a Baha'i on the 12th of November, 1988, when I was 55. So I think I was the slowest learner in town. I heard about it when I was about 15 and joined at 55. So 40 years I slogged at it. And during that time, I researched a lot. I wrote to people, and before I was a Baha'i, I wrote to Haifa. A couple of questions. One was, why weren't women allowed to be on the Universal House of Justice? And I got 5 very interesting pages back. And I I shared that around with my friend. We were running the Birdwood Post Office at the stage, and I shared it around with a lot of the customers that wanted to know something about the Baha'i faith, and that's how that came about. Yeah, but I felt the Baha'is offered a light. It offered a compass setting that people can get onto and stay on and make a positive contribution to the world, to humanity at large, actually. And I used to think in the police, when you're reading some dreadful stuff at times, I think, well, this is someone's son, someone's father, perhaps someone's brother. And it's a matter of how people think, I think, and sort of sets the compass for people. And it's been a big thing with me that what we say about things is very important. I never condemn anyone's religion now at all. In my police time, I may have. So lacked a bit of polish in that area, perhaps. Yeah, so for me, it's been a great, development too. Yeah. But like Bob said, Mr. and Mrs. Featherstone were great pillars of light for me as a young chap too.
Well, once again, thank you for sharing that with us. Now, we do have a number of questions and comments in the chat, but I do want to give preference to those friends who are from South Australia, because tonight we're trying to learn about the history and evolution of the South Australian Bahai community. And I'd just like to see if any of our friends online would like to make some comments or some questions back to Maury and Bob and Selma before we have questions from the rest of us. So is there anybody who would like to share something of significance about the South Australian community? Let's just see who would like to share something. So John Handley and Mariette. John, did you have something? Unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Look, I would just like to comment about Howard Harwood. When I lived in Western Australia, Howard visited the community in Western Australia a number of times, and this was during the 1960s. And Howard had a lot of the trends that Collis had. He was therefore very forceful in his protection of the faith. He was very forceful in encouraging the Baha'is to teach. And he was a very spiritual man in as much as encouraging people to pray. And I think that's the three things that I recall from Howard. He was a very big man. He was a very jovial man. And that's the three things I think I recall of Howard. And we loved him so much. Thank you.
John, thank you for sharing that. I agree, those words, the jovial, he was such a pleasure to be with. Yopi, I'm just wondering if you have anything you wanted to share, and I'm not sure if Jackie is there online. Jackie, hi. What would you like to share with us? You've got to unmute.
I just was waving hello. So hello to dear Selma and Bob and to Johan and other friends, June and so on. So yeah, I knew the Harwoods very well. We used to go up to their fruit block at Cooltong back in the 1960s, and it's through the Harwoods and Featherstones that I became a Baha'i back in the 1960s.
Jackie, lucky to see you online. Wondering whether you have any other memories from that time when you first joined the community. What was your impression of the Baha'is there? Who were the outstanding figures for you and most influential on your life?
So you put me on the spot there. Margot Jackson, of course, and the Harwoods, probably the main ones that I remember from that time. For the 1960s. Perhaps Johan can help me out here. Not that he was very old then. He would stay with us when we were living in Tea Tree Gully, and on his travels through to Adelaide or through to the Pacific, through New Zealand. He would come to our home and he would tell stories, and he was a riveting speaker. I really, really enjoyed listening to him in those days. Yes.
Graham, I have something I'd like to say if you can.
Yes, please, Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wondered because in my early days when my family became Baha'is in South Australia, and I first, through my twin brother, worked for Harwood, and it was interesting. That was the first time he had ever met Aboriginal people. And, you know, living in Adelaide and South Australia, it was a very much white community. But Bob, I want to say that you remind me so much of your father. He came to the Solomons. He was a big man, and I mean, the Solomon Islanders are not large people, and you had this awesome man full of energy running around, visiting the villages and talking about the faith, and that made a big impression. So it's been great to hear from you and get the reminiscence of him, because he enjoyed very much his time up there. And the other thing, talking about, I just want to share a story with Collis. My family became Baha'i, my mum and dad, and my older brother Graham became Baha'is in the Woodville area through, then in the final period before my mother decided to become a Baha'i. Collis and Madge Featherston were deepening us, the family, into the faith. And I remember when we became Baha'is that Collis Featherston came, and as Australian, you know, prayer wasn't a big thing, but Collis came to teach us, the family, and the genuflections that go with the long obligatory prayer. And this was a mind-blowing moment for me to see this man in our front lounge showing, bowing and doing the different the movements of the prayer. So I just wanted to add that for a bit of interest. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bruce. Johan, I wonder if you're online and if there's anything that you want to share. And Barry, I can see you've got your hand up as well. So Johan, are you there?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'd love to hear from you.
Howard was also really kind. Like my father was probably one of his closest friends. He taught my father the faith at a time that he was a young man in his late 20s who was a judo champion and full of life, but had discovered that he had cancer. And my father had been searching since he had a near-death experience as a child in World War II in Holland. And when he met the Harwood family, he found what he'd been searching for, and it completely changed his life. And you know, rather than being, you know, having self-pity at getting cancer at such a young age, he regarded it as a gift, and he had such a strong faith, and that came from Howard and the Harwood family. When I was 15, I went and stayed up at the Berry Fruit Block with the Harwoods, and because my father died when I was 7, there's a lot that I didn't know about him, and Howard and Myrtle were really kind in sharing stories that I wouldn't have known about. For example, when he went to Haifa and met some of the Hands of the Cause, and you know, he prayed in the shrine of Baha'u'llah, and his prayer was answered. So Howard he was a lot of fun. He was, but he also had a tender kindness as well. And he spoke with so much love and respect about Uncle Fred Maury. Yeah, huge influence in our lives.
Thanks so much for sharing that. I know it's very personal, very meaningful, and sharing it with us tonight. Thanks, Johan, for that. That's great. Very special evening to hear from our guests online. I'm just wondering, you've got your hand up, and then Marriott as well.
Oh, I just thought I would make a few comments as to when our family used to visit Cooltong. You know, it was a big fruit block. Bob didn't say what they used to grow. They had peaches, apricots, oranges, grapefruit. They used to dry the apricots, and I remember the workers would be there in the big open shed, cutting the apricots in half and putting them on the big trays, you know, so that they would put sulphur and then the big sugar bags on top to dry them. And then there was, Bob, you should talk about the Nissen hut, where the workers, the pickers used to come, and many of them were Aboriginal, and this is how Howard made a lot of friends with the Aboriginal community. Maybe you could talk a bit more about that.
Would you like me to do that, Graham?
Bob, that was going to be my next question. Murray had already asked it. The friends would love to know about your family's engagement with the Aboriginal communities. There's Uncle Harry Carter, there's their friendship, there's other Aboriginal friends that we don't know much about, and you might be one of the special people who has memories that you can share with us.
Let's go back to the beginning. The beginning was that Uncle Fred lived over near Esperance. His whole tribe was killed, and him and his brother George, they got taken in by a family. They stayed with that family a while, and then these two boys went across to Nullarbor, and Uncle Fred finished up in Central Australia, where he was working with some white people that were dam sinkers and sheep graziers and drovers and things like that. And those white people happened to be the ancestors of my father. They were my grandmother's brothers and uncles. So that's the first connection that there was with Aboriginals, with the family, not necessarily with Howard, but with the family. That's true. The Aboriginal people did used to work for us. There was an Aboriginal family that lived up above our property, and they used to come and work and pick apricots, like Marriott was saying. The Aboriginal that lived in our Nissen hut was, in actual fact, Uncle Fred and his family used to come, and they lived in the Nissen hut for quite some time. And then Uncle Fred went off to London to the Congress. And just the other day, somebody sent me a copy of, on the computer where I could actually listen to what he said, and I haven't had time to listen to it yet, but it was fantastic. But in relation to teaching Aboriginal people, and Beryl and Ephraim Tripp and Madge and Morris Williams, they spent a lot of time. One of the highlights of that was when Riha Kanum came to Australia. She wanted to meet Aboriginal people, and therefore the organising people that made all the decisions decided that she would come to Adelaide, and we would, and the people there organising it would organise to go to the Aboriginal people. And we went one day to Ralka, which is Point Macleay, just near, round by Meningie on the other side of Lake Alexandrina. And there was 3 or 4 cars of people, and Rihikunum and Jessie Revell and the lady that had the boarding house, Stella Childs, those sorts of people. And we went to the mission, and the white man that was in charge of the mission told us in no uncertain language what we could do and where we could do it. So we decided that we'd leave from there. We went back down the road to where there was a hall and a big oval. And that's where we stopped there for a while. And we thought, well, what are we going to do now? Rihikunum wants to meet these people, and we got sent away. And we sort of contemplated what to do. I didn't, but the adults actually contemplated what to do. And the next thing we know, we see a whole lot of dust along the road. The Aboriginal people had found out what had happened, and they got in their cars, and they all came out to meet us at that shed and at that oval. And if you can imagine, on most ovals, there's always those yellow dandelions. And there was just seemed like acres and acres of these dandelions. And if you could picture, Rihikunum sat in amongst all of these flowers, And all the Aboriginal women and the children all sat around her, and they all talked and talked and talked. And I don't know what they talked about because I wasn't listening to all of that. I was spellbound by the, wow, look at this. I see the Aboriginal people in a completely different light. And when they were with Recollections, it was just, I don't have the words to describe it. I have pictures of it. I took pictures of it with my camera. And I have no idea today where they are, but they're somewhere. And then after a while, she stood up and they then took her out onto the oval and showed her how to throw a boomerang. And she was quite good at it, actually. Recollections in the pictures looks sort of a slight woman, but when you see her in real life, she's not slight at all. She's quite robust and she's quite strong. And she was able to really put some oomph into throwing those boomerangs, and they did come back. She was quite a talented and very quick to pick it up. So that was a very interesting day. It was fascinating today, and obviously she was happy with what happened, and she went back to Stella Childs' boarding house, and she stayed there for the night and made Stella's night and day, and then they disappeared. They went, I don't know where they went somewhere else. My father used to go out teaching the Aboriginal people, and I used to go with him. I don't know why.
Excuse me, Bob.
Yes?
I have those photos. Can I put them on the screen for you?
By all means, Graham.
And you can talk while the photos are on.
There's a lot of funny stories. One of the funny stories was that we went to, there you go, there's the flowers. Where did you get them from? Yes, there's the flowers, and there's Uncle Fred, the Recollections on the right.
Mum, that's Gertrude.
Wow.
That's Gertrude Blum.
Yes. That's Kathy's mother.
Keithy, yeah.
Keithy. Yeah. Sorry. That's Bruce Saunders. That's Bruce Saunders.
Where?
That's Beryl and Ephraim Tripp. Yes.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Just going back to the beginning of the set, and then I think that's the first one.
Can I tell you a story about Ephraim?
Yes, please.
We used to go fishing at Waipinga Beach. And we used to walk all the way down the hill and along the shore until we got to a certain place. And then everybody would stop there, and then we'd start fishing. And we all had our big rods that were about, 10 feet long, and big reels and everything. And Ephraim had one of those round plastic fishing thingamabobs that you sort of just cast it out. He was the one that caught the fish. It was fantastic.
That's a nice one.
See all the flowers? They're all yellow daisies. That's actually my brother. Oh, just a minute. Who is that?
David.
Yes, it is
David.
David. Yes, it is. It is David.
Wow.
And I'm in one of those other photographs that
there she is.
Graham posted.
Yes.
She is throwing the boomerang.
Yeah. Mariette, was you there on that day? Must have been. You must have been.
I'm putting all these pictures in my Zoom thing. These things.
Yeah. See how strong she was?
And there's Howard.
Oh, yes. There's a picture of me.
That's unreal.
Is it? If you find it.
Yeah, you have it, I think.
Okay.
I was quite little. But...
Yeah.
Lovely photo, that one.
All right, those photos are from the National Bahai Archives.
Okay.
Bob, we don't want to interrupt you. We listened to your stories. Did you know anything more about the Carter family?
So, say again, please.
Harry Carter.
No, I'm not really familiar with Harry. He was on the sideline when I was involved. Let me tell you a funny story about the Aboriginals. When we first started to do the teaching, we'd go there, and my father would have a camera, a projector with a whole lot of slides, and he'd show all these slides. But he made the fatal mistake of actually making a fire and putting on the billy and having a barbecue and having a whole lot of chops and He'd buy half a sheep and a half a dozen loaves of bread, and he'd feed everybody. And then all the adults would go and sleep under a bush, and the kids would just watch all the movies, and watch the pictures. We very quickly learnt that you actually do the pictures first, and then you do the other after. But you gotta learn. And I'm not slinging off at the Aboriginal. I would have done the same thing myself. So we just got it wrong, and we got it wrong lots of times. And we had to struggle, and we had to learn. We had to, change our ways and change the way we approached the whole thing. And I still don't think we got it right, but we tried. What else can I say? I don't know. This book that you showed of Ioli's book, fabulous, absolutely fabulous book. But it's more than just a book. One of the things about being a Baha'i is you have to turn up. If you don't turn up, then you don't grow, you don't learn, you don't be part of. Even if you think, well, I could do something else on that day, just turn up. You don't know what's going to happen. And if you look very closely at that book, the picture is taken at Fernley Lodge. Now, I'm not really a city fella. I'm really a fella that likes to be out in the bush. But I went to that. And my benefit is I'm on the front page of it. And so is Mariette, and so is my mother, and so is a whole stack of Baha'is that were Baha'is at that particular time. So if you haven't got it, my recommendation to you, go and buy it. Only going to cost you $50.
That's great. Let's find a way to make that more available to people. Now, Yopi has got something more to ask. It's about Selma. So, Johan, you're there?
Yeah, I am. And I'm really sorry that I came in late. I just didn't realise it was on tonight. But it's interesting how God works. Because in the 1970s, my mother was teaching at Campbelltown High School, and Selma was teaching there as well. And so was Ruth Page, whose daughter Nicole Mahaja ended up pioneering to India as a doctor. But God brought them all together, and for some time it had been difficult for Selma to go to Baha'i things. But then from that time onwards, the Galvins, and I can see that Catherine's here as well, opened up their home, and it was like all the youth gatherings were there. It was just a beautiful, hospitable place. And so thank you. I've said it to Selma before anyway, but I'd like to acknowledge it to everybody else, that when I was a youth in the 1980s, their home was open, and we had so many Baha'i gatherings there, and it was always full of love and laughter. And Selma also was an excellent teacher. She tutored me in maths in year 12, and I wouldn't have got into law school if it wasn't for Selma. But the main thing is just that the Galvin household was just a place of vibrant Baha'i activities.
Thank you, Yopi. And Catherine, if you're there, can you just make sure that your mother got that message from Yopi? He's thanking her for everything she did in the 80s for the youth.
I did. Mum, did you get the message? No. Oh. Yes. Turn it off. Sorry, I got back. So Yopi was just saying thank you so much for having your home open to all of us crazy Baha'i youth in the 1980s. Yeah? So he's saying thank you.
Yeah, that's lovely. We did too.
Yeah, they did.
There's no difficulty.
No, it was wonderful. Thanks, Graham.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Thanks, Yopi.
Thank you, Yopi. Can I speak to Jackie?
Not, probably. Graham, Mum wants to know if she can say something.
Everybody's still online, so if she's saying to Jackie, with everybody here, we'd love to hear it.
If everybody's online, so are you happy for everybody to hear?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yes. Can I say something now?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Now, I just want to say something to Jackie. When I had a little talk, said a few things, I could have mentioned Jackie, and I'd love to have done it, because she was very important in my Baha'i life, and I want to say thank you to her. And she was wonderful, as she herself was going through a hard time. We never forget that. But, you know, she kept in, and the faith kept her going. And here she is, still there with all of us. It's just wonderful to know. And we certainly enjoy her son, and I love his compliments. Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Selma.
Thank you, Mum.
Thank you, everybody. So we're near the end of our time together. So I'll see if there are any other questions that we have directed to our three speakers for this evening, focused on what happened in South Australia.
Graham, I would like to know whether they wrote to the Guardian at all or not, and did they get a response?
The question is, did any of our three speakers write to Shoghi Effendi? The answer is, I don't think so, not that I know of, but I'll let them answer. So, sorry, Bob, I've muted your pad, but if you unmute, the question is whether your family wrote to Shoghi Effendi and got any responses. No, he said no. Any other questions?
Graham, Kevin here.
Hi, Kevin. Go ahead.
Hi there. Look, I was just wondering if Bob, I know the relationship between Howard and Collis was a reciprocal relationship as well. That Howard assisted with setting up the company that supported Collis during his period as a hand, to actually to work with. But I don't know if he is able to talk about that relationship and the way they co-supported each other.
So Bob, so long as you heard that question, and whether you could unmute and talk about that way in which these two businessmen were able to support each other in their company arrangements so that they could serve the faith. He's saying he's got nothing to say on that, Kevin. So friends, we're up to just the last few minutes together. If there's any last questions that we want to ask.
As we know, the friends would attend the summer school in Yarraville at the time of the early Baha'is. They would gather in summer there. Would any of the Adelaide friends at the time would participate or not?
Oh, yes.
So the question is about the South Australian friends participating in the Yarraville Summer School, and if any memories of that.
Well, my parents certainly did. In, I think the first, Christmas '53, we caravanned to Yarraville with the Hewson family. So that was two families who participated. Mother Dunn was there at that summer school. We subsequently went back a few years later. I'm not sure whether Howard went or whether the Harwood family went.
So Barrett's saying she did. She's not sure about it.
Yes, I did. 47.
So Mum, Selma Galvin went in 47. 1947.
Or 48.
Or 48.
End of 47, beginning of 48.
End of 47, yeah.
Do you have any memories to recall for us?
Do you have any memories about Yarraville, Mum?
Oh, a few, General, but I remember Howard, Bob, Howard, his sister, Avilda, saying she's a wonderful musician. And I remember her well there, playing the piano. She was only a fairly young girl, but that was lovely, yes.
What sort of things did you do?
Well, we had a nice little concert, you know, singing and playing and that sort of thing. What else did we do? They talked a lot about the administration that year. And I remember some people thought the administration was having too much weight in the discussions. They wanted a more spiritual, but of course the faith covers both areas. Can't get one without the other, can you? And it was a very pleasant time. And it was lovely. We travelled by train over there overnight, and we're all very grubby and disoriented. Oh, at least I was. And so a lovely hot bath, which the people there supplied us.
How many people were there?
Oh, I don't know, but they put us all up in bunks in a sort of a shed. So we were made very, very welcome and looked after us.
Who's that?
And the people that ran it were both osteopaths, I remember, which was an unusual profession in those days. People just beginning to consider it. But they both were.
Who were they?
I know their name, but I can't just...
I think you mean Boltons.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Boltons.
Was Mariette and Stanley Bolton.
Yeah, Bolton.
That was their holiday house, and Stanley was a chiropractor.
Chiropractor.
Oh, chiropractor, yes. That's right, I remember that. Yes. They certainly advanced the profession.
Yeah.
I remember
And as you heard from Selma, Vilda was a great pianist. And when I was studying to do my associate of music, I actually went to Vilda and had a few extra lessons in order to prepare myself for my examination. She was a wonderful teacher.
Apparently, yes, apparently. And I took the task of turning the pages while she was playing. That's fine.
May I mention something about Howard Harwood?
Yes, please go ahead, Neil.
Verna and I and the children attended a summer school, and Howard was there, and there was a statement earlier on that he was running about. Well, what happened was that in a tent, a fire, playing with candles, and a fire started, and Howard learned about this, and he ran, an extraordinary vision of him, of his size man, running to sort this matter out at the summer school. That's as much as I can remember, but he was definitely there, and there was something bad going on inside a tent.
Well, thank you, Neil, for that.
That's it.
All right. Friends, I think we're coming to the end of our session together. We'd like to thank our three wonderful speakers for this evening. We've all learned something of the early days of the Baha'i faith in South Australia. And so we'll bring this session to a close. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Graham, from Keithy and I.
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely.